The door slammed shut behind me, rattling the framed family photos on the wall. Photos that, I realized, no longer included me. I stood still in the parking lot of Morton & Sons, the company my grandfather built from nothing, the company I had dedicated 15 years of my life to. In my hands was a cardboard box, the sum of everything they had let me take. Some pens, a few notebooks, a nameplate that no longer muged on an office door. Behind me, my brother Jake Morton called out with a smug chuckle, "And don't even think about stealing our clients." I didn't turn around. I placed the box in the trunk of my black Porsche Taycan, closed it and straightened my blazer. Jake scoffed. "You know, we all wondered how you could afford that car. A middle manager's salary doesn't exactly scream luxury." I smiled to myself, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of an answer. They never asked the right questions. They never asked how I could afford my penthouse. Never wondered how I always seemed so calm in board meetings, even when my ideas were shot down. They assumed I was just the little sister, the one they could keep under control. They assumed wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Return your keycard. Your access is revoked." I typed back. "Already done." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Good luck without us." I chuckled softly, slipping my phone into my bag. If only they knew. They thought the Anderson Group contract, our largest deal, was just another renewal meeting next week. What they didn't know was that Anderson Group had been acquired 6 months ago. By me. By Phoenix Innovations, the tech empire I had spent a decade building, while they mocked my engineering degree and told me to stay in my lane. I slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirror, and glanced one last time at the Morton & Sons building. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. And they had no idea. My father, Richard Morton, had always believed in one truth. The Morton legacy belonged to his son. Jake was the heir. The golden boy. The one who never had to fight for his place at the table. I, on the other hand, was the afterthought. The backup plan. "What's the point of college, Natalie?" my father had said when I was 18, the night I got my acceptance letter to MIT. "You'll inherit a share of the company anyway." I still remember sitting at the dinner table, staring at him in disbelief. "I don't want to just inherit something. I want to build something. We already have a company, sweetheart." And that was that. In his mind, I was wasting my time. I graduated top of my class. I got my engineering degree. Then, just to prove a point, I got my MBA. And when I joined Morton & Sons, I worked twice as hard as Jake. Every cost-saving strategy? My idea. Every efficiency boost? My initiative. Every modernization project? Mine. Jake took the credit. My father gave him the promotions. And I let them because I thought one day they would see my worth. But today they had made it clear. They never would. That morning, the boardroom had been silent when my father slid a printed bank statement across the table. Care to explain this? The room had been full: executives, board members, the family. My mother sitting in the corner looking devastated. I picked up the paper. A list of financial transactions. My name circled in red ink. Jake leaned forward, a victorious smirk on his face. "Funny how someone making your salary can afford a penthouse and a Porsche Taycan." Huh? I blinked. And then I laughed. I shouldn't have. But the whole thing was so ridiculous I couldn't help it. "You think I stole money from the company?" "If the shoe fits," Jake said, shrugging. My father's expression hardened. "We did an internal audit. These discrepancies don't lie." I set the paper down and met his gaze. "Did anyone actually bother to check where my money comes from?" Silence. "No." I tilted my head. "Then you just fired the wrong person." And with that I stood up, grabbed my things, and walked out. "Mom, how could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you?" "Jake, you won't find another job. We'll make sure of that." "Dad, you're dead to us." I forwarded every message to my lawyer. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Because while they were celebrating my downfall, I was getting ready to dismantle everything they had left. The Anderson Group was Morton & Sons' largest contract. $50 million a year. A deal so stable that my father and Jake had never even considered the possibility of losing it. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake? Not realizing that 6 months ago, I had bought the Anderson Group outright through Phoenix Innovations. I stared at my phone. A new text from Daniel, my assistant at Phoenix. The paperwork is complete. You're now officially CEO of Anderson Group. Should we proceed with Monday's meeting? I took a slow sip of my wine, smiling. Yes. But first, send me everything on Morton & Sons finances. I want to know exactly how much they need that contract. I stayed up late, reading through the reports. And then I found it. A $5 million discrepancy in Morton & Sons financials. Labeled as Internal Development Project. Except no one in the company knew what it was. I sat back, my mind racing. Something wasn't right. I texted Daniel. Look deeper. Find out what this money is actually for. Because if there was one thing I knew about my family, they were never as smart as they thought they were. Friday night. My phone buzzed again. A new message. But this one was anonymous. You think this is over? Think again. I sat still, reading the words over and over. Then slowly I set my phone down. And I smiled. Because whatever game they were playing, I was already 10 moves ahead. Monday morning. I pulled into the parking lot of Morton & Sons, this time in a reserved visitor spot. My usual parking space had a new handwritten sign taped to it. Reserved for loyal employees only. I chuckled. Security had been expecting me. The guard at the front desk, a man who had known me for 15 years, refused to meet my eyes as he scanned my ID badge. I placed my Phoenix Innovations CEO badge on the counter, letting him read it. His hand shook slightly. I need to call upstairs. I nodded. Of course. I waited in the lobby, watching employees avoid my gaze, whispering to each other as they passed. Word had spread fast. I wasn't just the disgraced Morton daughter anymore. I was now the CEO of their biggest client. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jake. He walked toward me, radiating confidence, completely unaware of the storm he was about to walk into. You're not welcome here, he spat. The Anderson meeting isn't until. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes flicking down to my visitor badge. He read it once. Twice. Then his jaw clenched. This is a joke. I tilted my head, letting a slow, satisfied smile spread across my lips. Phoenix Innovations, I said clearly, ensuring every single person in the lobby could hear me. Parent company of the Anderson Group. I believe we have a meeting to attend. Jake paled. You're lying. I pulled out my phone. Want to call Anderson's office to verify? Or should we go upstairs and I'll explain everything all at once? He hesitated. Then, without a word, turned on his heel and stormed toward the elevators. I followed, stepping in beside him. The ride up was silent, but I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. For the first time in his life, Jake was afraid of me, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The boardroom was packed. My father, Richard Morton, stood at the head of the table. His face was tight, but his expression remained unreadable. The rest of the board members murmured among themselves, their gazes shifting between me and Jake. I placed my briefcase on the table and slowly unlatched it. Good morning, everyone. Silence. I'm here on behalf of Phoenix Innovations, the parent company of the Anderson Group. We need to discuss the contract renewal. My father stared at me like a stranger. This is impossible. Jake leaned forward, knuckles white against the table. You can't. You don't own Anderson. I slid a set of official documents toward the nearest board member. Would you like to see the paperwork? I asked, my voice smooth, controlled. The folders contained everything. The full acquisition details, my financial history, proof that I had been running a multimillion-dollar tech empire right under their noses. A thick, suffocating silence filled the room as each person opened their files. I could almost hear them doing the math. I watched my father's face carefully as he flipped through the pages. He wasn't just shocked. He was terrified. But Anderson has been our client for 20 years. Yes, I said evenly. And in those 20 years, what innovations have you offered them? What improvements have you made? While you relied on Grandpa's legacy, your competitors modernized. A few of the board members glanced at each other, uneasy. The only reason Anderson stayed was loyalty, I continued. And price points that barely covered your costs. Jake slammed a fist against the table. That's why you bought the Porsche Taycan. The apartment. The clothes. You thought I was stealing? I finished for him, a sharp edge to my voice. Because in your world, Jake, a woman, especially your little sister, couldn't possibly build something successful on her own. My father turned red, opening his mouth to argue. I cut him off. While you spent the last decade protecting the way things have always been, I built a company that actually works in the modern world. Lily, my sister-in-law, had been silent up until this point, but now she let out a small, knowing laugh. That's why you never argued when they passed you over for promotions, she mused. You were already running something bigger.
He winked to her.
She had always been the sharpest one in the family. The Anderson contract expires next week, I said, all business now. Phoenix Innovations has reviewed all potential manufacturers. You're no longer competitive. My father visibly blanched. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I raised an eyebrow. You called me a thief last Friday. You said I was dead to you. Why should I keep an outdated, overpriced manufacturer just because my father runs it? Jake shot to his feet. This is blackmail. I remained perfectly still. Calm. Composed. Dangerous.
No. Incorrecta.
This is business. The same just business you used when you stole credit for my cost-saving measures. The same just business you used when you gave yourself a bonus off my efficiency reports. The boardroom was dead silent. One of the senior board members cleared his throat. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Taylor? I smiled. Mr. Taylor, I corrected. I use my mother's maiden name professionally. Then I pulled out another document and placed it on the table. Phoenix Innovations is willing to fund a full-scale modernization of Morton & Sons. New equipment. Updated processes. Proper digital integration. In exchange, I want controlling interest in the company. My father sank into his chair, staring at the table. Defeated. Jake looked ready to explode. If you think we'll just hand over the company. I cut him off. Then what? I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Fire me again? Cut me out of the family photos once more? Tell me how disappointed you are. You have a choice, Jake. Take the deal and the company survives. Refuse and Morton & Sons collapses within a year. Silence. Then, one of the board members turned to my father. Richard, she's right. We need this. Another followed. And another. One by one, my father's allies turned to my side. The board chairman folded his hands. We'll need to vote. I stood, gathering my things. Of course. You have until Friday. I reached the door, pausing just before stepping out. Then I turned back to face them. After that, Phoenix will pursue other manufacturing partners. And I walked out, leaving them to watch their empire crumble. I walked out of the boardroom with measured, deliberate steps, feeling their stares burning into my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the afterthought. I was the storm they never saw coming. As I entered the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Daniel, my assistant at Phoenix Innovations. The board is voting Friday. Keep monitoring their financials. Understood. Also, we dug deeper into the missing $5 million. You need to see this. My breath slowed. I leaned against the cool metal of the elevator wall, staring at the screen. Email me everything. Whatever it was, I had a feeling this wasn't just bad accounting. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Mom. I debated ignoring it but sighed and answered. Natalie. Her voice was hesitant, careful, like she didn't know who she was talking to anymore. I stayed silent. Why didn't you tell us? She asked softly. About Phoenix Innovations? About everything. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer. You didn't think I could even handle a management role at Morton & Sons? I continued, my voice steady but sharp. Why would you have ever believed I built something of my own? A long silence. Then almost too quiet to hear. We really messed up, didn't we? For the first time she sounded small. Like she had finally started seeing me. Yes, I said simply. Can you forgive us? I let out a slow breath, staring at the highway stretching ahead. That depends. On what? Are you sorry because you regret how you treated me? I asked, my voice cold. Or because I turned out to be more successful than Jake? Silence. Then, I don't know, she admitted, voice breaking. That was enough of an answer. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Daniel's report was waiting. I scanned through it, my pulse steady, until I hit the key section. The missing $5 million wasn't just a financial oversight. It was a last-ditch attempt to save Morton and Sons. Through a private, under-the-table deal, my father had already secured funding from an outside investor. But not just any investor. A shadow firm with a reputation for hostile takeovers. If my father couldn't hold control after Friday's vote, they would move in. And they didn't play nice. That night, as I reviewed the details, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Meet me. Parking lot behind your building. Now. I stared at the message. The old me would have ignored it. The new me? I grabbed my coat. The parking lot was empty except for one man, leaning against a sleek black car. As I approached, he smirked. I was wondering when we'd finally meet, Miss Taylor. His voice was smooth, practiced. A man who was used to power. And you are? I asked coolly. Let's just say I have an interest in Morton and Sons' future. Let me guess, I said. You're the reason $5 million mysteriously vanished into a development project. His smirk widened. Your father made a deal with us, but he didn't read the fine print. If he loses control of Morton and Sons, we step in. It's just business. I tilted my head. And you came here to warn me? How thoughtful. I came here to offer you a deal, he corrected. You're smart, Natalie. Smart enough to build an empire right under your family's nose. You could keep Morton and Sons. If you work with us. I let out a short laugh. Right. Because partnering with a shadow firm with a history of bleeding companies dry sounds like such a great idea. His smile didn't waver. You might not have a choice. I stepped closer, voice calm but firm. I always have a choice. And unlike my father, I actually read the fine print. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. This was no longer just a corporate takeover. This was war. Friday. I arrived early. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Jake was already in the boardroom, his posture stiff. My father was seated at the head of the table, his fingers laced together. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were calculating. The chairman cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The vote happened quickly. One by one, board members cast their decisions. Then, the final count. My fingers tapped against my thigh as the chairman read the results. Majority votes in favor of Phoenix Innovations' proposal. The transition of control is approved. A cold silence filled the room. Jake clenched his fists. My father. He just exhaled slowly, as if he had expected this. Then he stood, sliding a folder across the table. Congratulations, Natalie, he said, his voice oddly even. But you might want to read this before you celebrate. I frowned and opened it. The moment I saw the documents, my stomach dropped. He had sold off his remaining shares quietly, before the vote even happened. To the shadow firm. You didn't think I'd just hand over my company, did you? It's not your company anymore. I shot back, my voice sharp. No, he admitted, adjusting his tie. But it's not fully yours either. You'll have to share control. I felt the weight of the room shift. The board members glanced between us, uncertain. The victory I thought I had secured suddenly felt incomplete. He had played his final card. And while he had still lost, he had made sure that I didn't get a clean win. This isn't over, I murmured. He smiled faintly. I know. Then he walked out, leaving me holding the papers. I had won. But my battle wasn't finished yet. That night, I was in my penthouse, reviewing contingency plans when my phone vibrated. An anonymous email. I opened it. Thought you'd like to know. Someone in your company has been leaking information. Might want to check your security logs. My breath caught. I logged into our internal system, scanning through access logs. One name stood out. Lily. My sister-in-law. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning into something colder. I had trusted her. She was the only one I thought had been on my side. And yet, she had been feeding information to someone. Whether it was Jake, my father, or the shadow firm, I didn't know yet. But what I did know, I had one more enemy to deal with. I took a deep breath, closed my laptop and picked up my phone. Daniel, I need you to do a deep dive into Lily Morton. Everything. Now. Because if she wanted to play games, she had no idea who she was up against. Lily Morton. The one person in my family I thought might have been on my side. The only one who hadn't mocked my ambitions. The only one who had ever sent me warnings about what Jake was planning. And yet, she had been leaking my information. I sat in my office at Phoenix Innovations staring at my laptop screen. Daniel had compiled everything. Lily had accessed confidential files weeks before the board vote. Emails, financial records, contracts. All the details I had used to secure control over Morton and Sons. Who did she send them to? I asked. Daniel hesitated. That's the part that's interesting. He turned his laptop toward me, pulling up the final email in her outgoing records. It wasn't sent to Jake. It wasn't even sent to my father. It was sent to the shadow firm. A cold wave passed through me. She wasn't just helping them, I murmured. She was working for them. Daniel nodded. Looks like they didn't just back your father as an emergency plan. They were embedding themselves long before that. Lily might have been their inside woman from the start. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. I should have seen this coming. And now? Now I had to deal with her. That evening I sent Lily a text. Dinner at my place? Just us. We need to talk. She responded almost instantly. Of course. What time? 8. I sat my phone down and exhaled. She had no idea that I already knew everything. But she would soon. At exactly 8 p.m., Lily arrived at my penthouse, carrying a bottle of wine. Something to celebrate? She asked with a smile. I took the bottle from her, set it on the counter, and motioned for her to sit. I found something interesting today, I said as I poured 2 glasses. She tilted her head, eyes curious but cautious. Oh. I slid my laptop toward her, the email logs pulled up. Care to explain why you were sending my confidential data to my enemies? The moment the words left my mouth I saw it, the flicker of panic. But she recovered quickly. Natalie, don't lie. My voice was steady, cold. I already know. A tense silence filled the room. Lily swallowed hard. Then she sighed. I didn't have a choice. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Everyone has a choice. She rubbed her temples, looking genuinely exhausted. You don't understand what they're capable of. If I didn't help them, they were going to. She stopped herself. Going to what? I pressed. Take Morton and Sons anyway? Undermine my company? Steal my work? They were doing all of that with or without you. Lily stared down at her glass. I thought if I worked with them I could protect my family. Protect Jake. Jake. Even after everything, she was still trying to save him. I sighed, rubbing my fingers along the rim of my glass. Did you ever stop to think that maybe, just maybe you were choosing the wrong side? Her hands trembled slightly. I thought I was making the best choice at the time. And now? She met my eyes and I saw something shift. Regret. Realization. Fear. Now I think I made a mistake. I leaned forward. You have one chance to fix it, Lily. Her breath caught. How? You're going to help me take them down. The next morning, I walked into Morton and Sons for what I knew would be the last time. Jake was already waiting for me in the CEO's office. My office now, his arms crossed, his face twisted in frustration. What the hell do you want now? He snapped. I smiled, stepping inside. I wanted to say goodbye. His brow furrowed. Goodbye. I nodded. You're going to want to check the news in about. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it, eyes scanning rapidly. Then his face went pale. What the? I sat on the edge of the desk, watching as realization sank in. The shadow firm? Gone. Lily had given me everything. The records of fraudulent dealings, illegal contracts, backdoor financial manipulations they had used across multiple companies. Enough to get them shut down permanently. I had forwarded everything to the SEC and the FBI. By the time the firm even realized what happened, the authorities were already at their doors. Jake looked up at me, stunned. You destroyed them. I gave a slow, satisfied nod. I did. Dad's going to lose everything. His voice was barely a whisper. I shrugged. So did I once. And unlike him, I built something better. Jake was shaking now. His entire foundation had crumbled overnight. Natalie. What am I supposed to do now? For the first time, he didn't sound angry. He sounded lost. I studied him for a long moment before finally answering. You figure it out. And with that, I turned and walked away. This time, I was the one leaving him behind. 1 year later, I stood in my office at Phoenix Innovations, overlooking the city skyline. Morton and Sons? It still existed, but under my control. A modernized, thriving company. My father had retired in disgrace. Jake had finally stepped down, forced to accept that his reign was over. A text popped up on my phone. Mom. Family dinner tonight. Lasagna, your favorite. Coming. I stared at the message for a long time. A year ago, she had called me a traitor. Now, they were trying to bring me back in. I hesitated, then typed a response. On my way. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and stepped outside into the night. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's giving them no choice but to respect you. I pulled into my parents' driveway, my black Porsche Taycan reflecting the dim porch light. It had been 1 year since I last stepped foot in this house, since I had been erased from their family photos and excommunicated from their legacy. And now they were inviting me back. I took a slow breath, staring at the house. Why am I even here? Part of me wanted to leave. Another part, maybe the part that was still that little girl wanting her father's approval, stepped out of the car. The door opened before I even reached it. Mom. She gave me a hesitant smile. You actually came. You invited me. She swallowed, looking uncertain. We wanted to see you. It's been too long. I studied her face, looking for signs of hidden motives, of another betrayal lurking beneath her words. But there was only guilt. She stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled the same: garlic, tomato sauce, and fresh bread. My mother's signature lasagna. A scent that once meant comfort now felt like a carefully placed lure. The dining room was quieter than I remembered. Fewer voices. Fewer people. Because my father wasn't here. Jake sat at the head of the table. His once arrogant posture was gone, replaced by something more subdued. He glanced up when I entered. Natalie. I raised an eyebrow. Jake. I sat down across from him. Mom hurried to serve dinner, making small talk about meaningless things, the weather, the neighbors, her new garden. I let her talk, but my focus was on Jake. Finally, he sighed, setting down his fork. I never congratulated you. I blinked. Excuse me. You won. I didn't think you could, but you did. I tilted my head. Is that your version of an apology? He exhaled sharply. I don't know. Maybe I just. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't want to fight anymore. I studied him. Jake was a lot of things: arrogant, entitled, a man who never had to fight for his place in the world. But for the first time he looked tired. You spent your whole life thinking you deserved to run Morton and Sons. I said, my voice even. How does it feel? Knowing you were never the right person for the job. His jaw tightened, but instead of snapping back, he simply nodded. It feels like shit. I let the silence sit between us. Maybe this was genuine growth. Maybe it was just another act. But for the first time in my life, Jake wasn't trying to outmaneuver me. He was accepting that he had lost. Mom cleared her throat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Your father wanted to come tonight, she said softly. I set my glass down. But he didn't. She shook her head.
No.
He's not ready. I almost laughed. He's not ready? I repeated, voice laced with disbelief. After everything he's done, he's the one who's not ready? Mom flinched. Natalie. No, I cut in. It's fine. Because I'm not ready either. The words settled in the room, heavy and undeniable. And for the first time, my mother didn't try to argue. She just nodded. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't something that could be undone. After dinner, as I stood in the doorway preparing to leave, Jake followed me outside. Natalie. I turned. He shifted awkwardly, as if struggling to find the right words. I need your help. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. I want to build something, he said, his voice hesitant. I don't want to be the guy who just inherited success. I want to create something of my own. Like you did. I studied him carefully. And you think I'm going to help you? I think I don't know where to start, he admitted. And you do. A year ago, Jake would rather burn everything to the ground than admit he needed me. Now he was asking for my guidance. I crossed my arms. You really expect me to believe that after everything? He held my gaze. I don't expect anything. I know I failed. And I want to do better. I let the silence stretch. Then finally I smirked. Fine. He blinked. I'll give you advice. I shrugged. But I'm not handing you anything. You want to build something? Prove you deserve it. Jake let out a breath, nodding. Fair enough. I stepped toward my car, then paused. Jake. Yeah. If you ever try to screw me over again. I turned to face him fully, letting my voice drop to a dangerous whisper. I will ruin you. His throat bobbed, but he nodded once. Noted. As I drove away, the weight of the night settled over me. My father was still in denial. My mother was still clinging to a hope that we could be whole again. Jake was trying to find his way. And me? I had one. Completely. But as I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I realized something. I had spent my entire life trying to prove I was more than just a Morton. Trying to prove that I deserved respect, recognition, control. Now that I had it, I wasn't sure I needed their acceptance anymore. Because the truth was, I had already built something greater than this family could ever offer me. And for the first time in my life I felt free. I pressed my foot to the gas, watching my childhood home disappear in the distance. I wasn't looking back anymore. Because the future was mine. A year later, I stood in my corner office at Phoenix Innovations, overlooking the skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. My company, my empire, my success, Morton & Sons, still standing, but not as a relic of my family's past. It had evolved. I made sure of that. The modernization plan had been brutal but necessary. Some employees stayed. Some left. My father's former loyalists had no choice but to adapt or be replaced. Jake? Surprisingly, he followed through. He took my advice, built his own business, and for the first time he didn't rely on his last name to do it. I hadn't handed him success. He earned it. It was the first thing he'd ever done that made me respect him. The knock on my office door pulled me from my thoughts. Daniel stepped inside. There's someone here to see you. I raised an eyebrow. Who? Your father. A long silence stretched between us. I had prepared for this moment for years. The moment he would come to me, not as my father, but as a man who had lost everything. Send him in. Richard Morton stepped inside, looking smaller than I remembered. He had aged in the past year. Not physically, but in his presence. The once unshakable patriarch now looked like a man who had spent too much time realizing his mistakes. Natalie, he greeted, voice careful. I folded my hands on my desk. Dad. He glanced around my office, eyes flickering to the awards, the framed press articles, the proof of everything I had built without him. I saw Jake last week, he finally said. I waited. He told me he's doing well. He told me. You helped him. I tilted my head. Is that why you're here? He exhaled slowly. No. A pause. I came to say I was wrong. The words hung in the air. Not an apology. Not exactly. But the closest thing a man like Richard Morton could give. I studied him, waiting for the anger, the resentment, the need for validation. But I felt nothing. He had no power over me anymore. I know, I said simply. And that was the end of it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Because some wounds don't heal. Some lessons only sink in when you've already lost everything. He had spent his entire life doubting me. Now he had to live knowing I never needed him to win. Goodbye, Dad. I said, my voice even. For the first time, he didn't argue. He simply nodded, accepting the loss, and walked out. As the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. And just like that, the last tie to my past unraveled. I turned back to the window, the city lights flickering below. I had spent years fighting to prove myself. Now, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I had already won. And this time I wasn't looking back.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.